So one of the things that really excites me when I'm leading professional learning is when the school leaders are there and a part of the professional learning. I've got so much respect for school leaders who are not just administrative leaders. I know that's a big part of everyone's job, but who are really pedagogical leaders like the three of you, who are kind of leading thinking and leading change within schools. Michelle, this is your first year as head of primary at Hatem International Community School. It's a PYP school, but you've been introducing concept-based inquiry. How's that gone and how are teachers receiving that?
Yeah, it's been a really exciting journey to be part on. I think I was really lucky because when I got there, I soon discovered that two of the teachers there, one of them the PYP coordinator and another teacher, had done the CBI course with you, the 8-week course. And then another teacher said, "Oh, Michelle, I've ordered these new books for reading for our PLCs." And I said, "Oh, which one is it?" And it was the Green Book by Rachel French and Carla. I was just like, "Oh, wow, this is great." So for me, it was great because it's like, okay, we've already got a little bit of buy-in, we've got a little bit of interest. So then, of course, because I'm doing the CBI training, I had to plan an initial unit. So I thought, well, I'll pick those two teachers, the PYP coordinator and the one who's already done the course, and we'll plan together. And I said, "Oh, can I plan and can I teach this in your class?" And they were, of course, great. And then the PYP called and said, "Wow, Michelle, Miss Michelle, this is great." And he was so effusive. And then the next thing I know, he's getting all the teachers on board with the planning this one. It's like, slow down, because it's really time consuming. "Oh, but they're starting next week." I was like, no. It takes like a good 6 weeks minimum to plan these units properly. And so that was good. So I got buy-in straight away, really, from those teachers. And then I was talking with my secondary principal, and they're just in their second year of NYP, and he said, "Look, the teachers don't really understand concepts or concept-based learning." And I said, "Wow, there's this course we could put them on." And then luckily for us, we were allowed to put 10 teachers on the year-long CBI course. Yes. And so we have teachers doing that currently now, and of course that involves planning and teaching lessons. And then I went to the board and I said, okay, this is what we're doing. We are still a PYP school. We're remaining true to PYP, but we are adding more rigour and more intent with our planning and our teaching and our learning. And this is what it looks like. And I started with a concept sort and did some of the engagements in the book. And they loved it. The head of school said, "Wow, I've never seen them that engaged." So that was also really powerful. Then the head of school did one of your master classes, and now when I said I wanted to do join the maths project as well, he's like, "Yep, sure." So for me, I was really lucky because there was a seed of interest first, and then I just grew that seed slowly with the next level, the next level, and the next level, and so on. So now we are all planning in a CBI way. We've adapted the PYP planner, so we're remaining true to the IB expectations, and everyone is planning their units of inquiry this way, and we've done a couple of maths units this way as well, and we are now working with the specialist teachers as well. So it's really powerful. It's really exciting. It's been a crazy year, starting as a head of a primary in a new school and doing the CBI training. It's been really busy and sometimes a bit overwhelming, to be honest. But what's really exciting is that the teachers are now coming to me and saying, "Michelle, can you join us for this planning? Can you help me with this planning?" And you can't say no to that.
No, you can't.
I can't say no when they are coming and going. Just before I left, one of my teachers, who's been what I would call a resistor up till now, she wasn't an early adopter, and then she was like, "Michelle, can you join me for planning this week?" I said, "Oh, remember, I'm leaving, but I have time tomorrow. Have you got any time?" "Yes." So we fitted in an hour on the day that I was leaving. So
fantastic.
It takes a lot of time and a lot of energy, but it's really rewarding when the teachers come to you and they say, "Miss Michelle, this is their generalisation. Look at what they said. Look at what they did." Or when you're in the classroom, when you're hearing that for yourself, I'm like, this is great. It's making a difference.
That's so exciting. Yeah. And it sounds like it's really come from the teachers themselves.
Yes.
And when you said, she was initially a resistor, but now she's ready, that's come from watching the success in the classrooms and seeing you know, what's happening. And that's the way that we get teachers on board. To that gradual approach has got you where you are.
Little by little, and just giving them time, and then they come to you.
Yeah.
I liked how you talked about PYP and concept bases. It's not something different, in that this is part of our identity, and this is how it can actually create, whether it was more intentional learning, I think you might have said. I think that's what you had said, and so I thought that was really powerful and a really nice way of saying that this isn't something as an add-on or it's different, but they actually need to go together.
And I think they marry really well together because of that intentionality and that rigour that I found was missing for me.
Because you'd worked in PYP schools previously.
Yeah. And I loved it, of course, and that's why when you're moving schools you want to be in a PYP school. But for me there was always something not quite, there was something missing, and maybe I just wasn't doing it right, you know. But then when I discovered CBI and I discovered that inductive nature, I think that's been a real shift for me. Inductive, you know, instead of deductive, and also they form their own generalisations now, or their own central ideas. Those are the two biggest powerful things that I've seen. And when teachers understand that, they're like, oh wow, this works.
I would say that they are two faces of the same coin. Working as a workshop leader with the IB, I remember long time ago we used to use the literature of Lynn Erickson in terms of explaining what the concept-based curriculum is and the concept-based instruction. So it's kind of like it's all links at the end of the day, and it answers the question why in a very deep and profound and meaningful way.
Absolutely. I know that Lynn was very involved. She wrote position paper for the MYP many years ago, and she was very kind of influential for their thinking of the development of the programs. Yeah, absolutely. Hatem, when I spoke to you recently, you talked about the need to create an urgency for change in your school and working with teachers who had come from a more traditional approach themselves. How's that going? How did you approach that?
So it's a very interesting journey, but it starts with accepting the fact that the only constant in life is change. Yet it is the most resisted concept in life, change, again. So, and especially when we contextualize that, my school does a very good job in retention. So almost the majority of the teaching body are retained, and they are veterans. They have been doing it their way for so long. So I started putting the poster of the 8 steps of change for Qatar, and of course it starts with creating the urgency and then creating the team, which are the people who are going to be the early adopters, of course. And I went this way, and luckily we had the contextual urgency of the IB-NCIS visit, a whole continuum evaluation, which just finished recently. So this was the incentive that we worked on. And we worked on sending our unit planners to the IB, the BQC, and we got them back, and this was starting with the written curriculum. So the aspect at hand, we have evidence that we need to move on. There's always space for development. And creating this buy-in for all members of staff, we started, okay, so how are we going to go about that? And how is this going to be reflected on our teaching and learning? And during that time, I was taking the CBCI, so I instantly introduced it and put it on the table. So we had discussions about the conceptual lens, and there were a lot of aha moments. So, wow, this is why we're doing it. So, because you always has this discussion in terms of starting with the content and then conceptualizing it, or starting with a concept and then trying to find the link with the content, and especially in MYP and DP, because DP is more content driven as well. So you find this challenge and these questions that are kept unanswered. And the CBCI provided these answers in a very meaningful way, and I was happy to see that the impact was not only in adopting it, but also in creating this vibe. And currently I have a teacher who has enrolled in the coming session, and I have a couple who are applying and one who is thinking. So,
fantastic.
So yeah, it's kind of how you can measure the impact and move forward.
Erin, you've also at UWC had a number of teachers. Hatem's about to have several more teachers work through the Trainer Certification Institute at UWC. That's been historically something that they've kind of had cohorts of teachers go through the Trainer Certification Institute together. What does that create for the school?
That's a really good question. So One thing that we've tried to do is, if educators are going through anything with CBI, is that they come together and contextualize it for our school, because even though we're hearing kind of what is the philosophy, sometimes you still have to then, okay, what does that mean in language for our teachers? So we're creating a less of a cognitive load when we go into PL with teachers. So there's some of those pieces that we try to help close the loop with, but it also then gives everybody a space to ask questions as they've taken in new content from a course and needed to pull it together in their own practice. So I think that's really powerful about groups going through this kind of learning together. I think one of the other pieces, which would be like more about the impact you were kind of starting to talk about, was now we have instructional coaches that are working with teachers around unit planners. And so what does that look like to support teams in doing this? What does it look like if they've been through several unit planners from a concept-based inquiry standpoint? And how do we create sustainability in teams to do that? And so you can really see that this dialogue has kind of progressed in those areas where people have kind of grown themselves in concept-based teaching and learning, and then what is it like when we're working with other teachers to kind of grow and have this dialogue. I think the last part then that we talk about is that now we're to a point where so many people are going through the institute side of things that when we run our new teacher training, that's an annual one-day workshop, there's so many people who can present it. That's actually a really nice piece, that it doesn't always have to fall on one or two leaders in the school, that there's actually a nice collection of voices that are coming from different disciplines or different developmental areas in the school, that they can really speak to it, and it becomes so much more powerful and not tokenistic, which is really one of the pieces of feedback that we valued in the last few years, as more people have completed this training and have been able to contextualize it.
Well, and for the continuity of the school, it's not one person who's the holder of that.
Right.
So, I mean, you've had lots who've also since moved on to other schools,
Right.
and you don't lose that momentum because one person has changed schools, which has been really powerful.
And you want to embed that, don't you, so it's sustainable change, because when you're talking about change, you want it to be sustainable. You don't want all of that to go, oh, that person who was driving that leaves, someone else comes in and now we do something else, and that's where you get that fear of change and those resistors. They don't want to change because it's always something new. Mm-hmm. Yeah, sounds really powerful.
Yeah.
Okay.
For UWC, you moved away from the IB, or not from the IB, from the PYP.
Yes.
So you moved away from the PYP, and
Yes.
you've moved. So tell us about some of that journey and how concept-based has supported. Yeah.
So PYP would have been one of the first curriculums that the school moved away from, and part of it was that we felt like we wanted to be more mission aligned in our approaches to teaching and learning. And so while PYP gave a framework, we really needed to articulate knowledge and skills, and then how does that lead into understandings. And so using concept-based written curriculum and being able to free ourselves from that really gave us that opportunity to kind of mold what the written curriculum could look like. And then we've recently done a similar journey with our 9-10 program, where we've stepped away from IGCSE. So as a school, we formally said we won't be following IGCSE, and now we've written about 40 new courses that are all concept-based and coming from a place of what does mission-aligned learning look like, how do we look at interdisciplinary learning, but what's been the most powerful is that we're able to start with concepts, which IGCSE wasn't, coming from that background. And so that's been really powerful, that the teachers now can say, you've always asked us to be concept-based, and we really felt there is a pull on knowledge or skills depending on what content you're in, and now we actually feel this freedom to kind of think about how can we do this from the very beginning and not an afterthought or a layer on top of. And so that's been a really big shift in the school recently.
What was that like, writing 40 courses? What did that look like? Yeah.
That's intense, but at the same time, it was more about, I didn't write, like even though I'm a head of curriculum, I never write, I facilitate. And so what does that look like? What are the mechanisms we can give teachers so they're empowered to do it? What was so interesting is we've just read now, everybody's finished articulating their grade 9 and their grade 10 curriculum, so now we can kind of look at big picture, are we meeting our course aims, things that we're aspiring to be. One of the takeaways was that for those curriculums that were really strong, it was that they had gone through a process of saying, I'm going to check in with someone, I'm going to get coaching along the way, and it wasn't, I'm going to go and try and iterate on my own. And you could really see those that had had a chance to dialogue with either colleagues in their discipline, or it'd come back to others that maybe knew how to say it from a concept-based point of view, whatever it was, you could really see that those spoke to those aspirational goals, and it felt and it read, and you really felt inspired to say, yeah, I want to come take this course. So those were some really nice takeaways from it. But it was a process for sure, and it wasn't something we said, oh, we'd do in a short period of time.
How long did it take?
So from when we first said we would do it to the first year students were in seats, it was about 14 months. But prior to that, it would have been another 8 months ahead of time that leadership said, yes, we're moving in this direction. So we had a little bit of time to start thinking about what does that process look like, and then 14 months to write the first year, and then another year to write the second year of the courses, if that makes sense.
So that was time, but also what did it look like? Did you release teachers for time?
Yeah, so there was additional funding from a couple of areas within our school to do it. And so teachers either had a combination of release time or release allocation. It just depended. And then we used professional learning days, really like we prioritized what work needed to be done, but also on our professional Wednesdays after school, we prioritized 3 areas. So well-being was one, the 9-10 program, and then there would have been other business that we needed to take care of, and those were kind of the 3 things that we juggled throughout the year to do that.
This is really inspiring because I do share the challenges, of course, and one of which is time. And when we prioritized, you have to pick the hill that you're going to die on. So we basically, yes, we admit and we know that our written curriculum needs some work, but then when you start fixing that, how much time would that be needed? So we started introducing some bits and pieces of concepts just to, rock the boat and kind of raise awareness of how this is, or how this fits into the bigger picture of the conceptual inquiry, and how does it feel like and smell like to have a classroom that is based on inquiry rather than as opposed to the traditional way of teacher-centered approach. So we focused basically on the teaching strategies rather than the, writing the written curriculum, because we thought that this would be done with multiple strategies, like for example an open classroom policy, having teachers walk through other classes and sharing the best practices by the end of the day or by the end of the week. Having a demo lesson and recording it and having some review and feedback from other members of staff, so that kind of having this exposure and seeing how we do it, because I believe the best professional development is just the teacher next door, and then taking it forward, which eventually happened and encouraged many to enroll, I believe. So yeah, we just focused on the taught curriculum as a first step, because you have to always go in a stepwise approach.
Yeah, that's interesting, because it's something that I often ask schools when they ask me to come in for a workshop is, where do you want to start, the written curriculum or the taught curriculum? Yeah. Because both are possible, and it really depends on where teachers are at. And you've talked previously about your teachers coming from a more traditional approach. So the taught curriculum gives them some insight into what it could look like. And if you don't know what it could look like, then starting with the written curriculum, you're going to get the same as what you've already got if they're going to document what they're doing. So there's got to be a shift in, it could look different. This could be different.
Yeah, and I think that was something for me as well, and I'd talked to you, Rachel, about that. It was like, okay, there wasn't a lot of curriculum documentation in place, so when we were introducing CBI and planning, and of course the focus really is on those facts and knowledge and those processes and skills that underpin your conceptual understandings and your generalizations. And so like, where do we get that from? Where do we get those concepts from if we do not have already our curriculum documented? So then it was like, okay, so we've got 2 options. We can write a curriculum, which takes a really long time, or we can start teaching and planning this way, and then we can pull our curriculum from that documentation. So that's almost what we've done now. And so my PYP coordinator, that's what he's doing, is documenting now all the skills and knowledge. We've got the topics, because we've reviewed our POI mid-year and got feedback around that from teachers. And now he's documenting that, so that next year they will have all of that in place to start with.
Which is actually what the IB, Scope and Sequence for Science and Social Studies, PYP, was. That's why you can't just adopt the PYP Social Studies Scope and Sequence, because it's aligned to a specific program of inquiry. And so you've built you've used your program of inquiry as a basis for your social studies and your science scope and sequence.
Yeah. And then, of course, we are lucky enough we've joined the maths project. So all of my PYP teachers have joined, and we had our first meeting last week, and now they're very excited about where that goes to next. And because it's all mapped out, it's quite a relief for them, I think, that we don't have to do that work. Yeah. And when they saw it, was just like conceptual understandings, knowledge, skills, and then all the lessons. And so they're very excited to get on board with that and see the power. We've planned a couple of units before this, and those teachers were really engaged. So that's a really good next step for us, because I think seeing and working in that maths framework model will also help. How can I transfer my own knowledge and understanding and skills now into planning my science unit or my social studies unit, or my biggest next focus is the literacy one.
And just being able to go through that maths project that's being documented in that way will give teachers a framework for, well, what's the connection between the questions and the conceptual understandings? How do the learning experiences scaffold to the understanding? So you can kind of reverse engineer it, if you like. So that's exciting. Erin, what advice do you have for school leaders who are kind of making those decisions about curriculum design? Because UWC is several iterations down that probably more than 5 years down that process.
12 years, I think.
Oh, there you go. 12 years down there.
So there's some legacy there, right? Yeah.
So if you were to start that again now, like if you to move to a new school and they said, hey, it's a brand new school, what do you want to do?
Those are good questions, and so I've been thinking about this, especially hearing other educators here to speak about their experiences, a concept-based and where everybody's thinking about starting. I think one of the things that's made UWC so successful is that it's part of our guiding statements, and so that always points us back to where we are as a school and why this underpins, and it literally says that on the guiding statement. It underpins our well-being, it underpins our learning principles and our elements of our program. Because we want to be explicit about that. And then I think the second piece is that the school did make a really strong decision to say we're going to write a written curriculum that is concept-based. But also I think there needs to be really clear about what we mean by that. Doesn't mean we give every conceptual understanding. We give enough so that way teams can then go away and plan units, but there might need to be other micro conceptual understandings that they write, but it's enough that well, we have 2 campuses, we still have an alignment between that. And also then gave enough freedom that people could think about what kind of implied concepts might you bring in, what kind of case studies might you bring in, and if you're in 2 different classrooms or you're across 2 different campuses, you might need to have some flexibility in that. And so how do we still write a written curriculum that then enables everybody to do what they need to do but still holds us accountable? So I guess my advice was things that made it successful and why it's still a 12 years and we're still iterating on it is because it was chosen to be articulated in a mission and vision, and then we've articulated it. I think the other pieces though that's been supportive is that we do set aside professional learning days, so all of our new staff have at least a 1-day workshop on how to kind of enter into UWC and what are some of the differences between maybe being coming from an IB background versus how we talk about concept-based teaching and learning. And so there are some pieces around that we try to make sure everybody comes together around so they see, I guess, the power behind concept-based teaching and learning, and it's not left to interpretation, if that makes sense.
Is that something that all new teachers across both campuses, regardless of their grade level or subject area, do together?
Yes, and so it just depends on how many and what we feel is a good size to facilitate. So this year we had a lot of new teachers due to the pandemic and needing to transition, so we had 50 teachers. It was too many to facilitate, so we really thought about if we split that in half, what would that look like? And then we made sure that we had 4 facilitators to make sure that that room was really built for people to have opportunities to speak with each other, and also it gave us a greater opportunity to differentiate the room. And so that way those that might be coming with a PYP or MYP background versus someone who might be coming from a different background that isn't concept-based, they could still be in a room and still felt like they were part of a cohort together, but not necessarily all on the same journey at the same place. So that was helpful as well.
Yeah. What do you do in your school to kind of onboard new teachers, Hatem?
You mentioned something along the lines of beginning with the end in mind and understanding by design, which is basically That's why the focus is basically on what happens in the classroom. At the end of the day, it doesn't really matter which international system of schooling that you are following, this or that. It really comes down to the teacher and how they are delivering their understanding and this huge part of the dimension of the curriculum. So again, we always have to focus on creating this buy-in with the teachers, and by this they have to understand and believe how does it look like in the classroom, so that we get to have them as a group sit down on the table of collaborative planning and start writing the curriculum. Because if this is not there, if they don't see it, if they don't visualize it, it will end up being just a burden of writing documents that are totally disconnected to what is happening in the classroom, and it will just be another task to check. And so yeah, basically focusing on the taught curriculum and the assessed curriculum builds this purpose. And we know we might be passionate about something, but it doesn't create a continuity. So to create the sustainability, they have to focus on purpose. And I think, again, teaching and what's happening in the classroom, whether it's inductive, whether it's deductive, whatever the approach that you're using, how does it lead to, one, deepening the understanding of the students, and two, creating this motivation. Motivating them in terms of asking this question, why? I remember as a principal, I stand in the morning lineup and I ask the students and I encourage them, when you go to the first period, ask your teachers, why are we learning this? What is the concept that we are learning? Why are we learning what we're learning, and why are we learning it this way? So that this kind of discussion starts happening between the learner, who is at the end of the day the purpose of the school, and the teacher who is providing this concept.
I love that you're encouraging students to ask that. That was something I always asked, especially as a teenager, to teachers, and I genuinely wanted to know. I wasn't kind of doing that to be rude or to throw it back at them. Why are we learning this? How am I going to use this, particularly in maths? Like, what is the purpose of this? When will I need to use this? Help me understand that.
So one of our quality assurances of writing our new courses at 9-10 was that we said we'd visit classrooms. And so we used a series of questions that we created similar to learning mocks, I think it was what it was based on. And so the idea was just that we had some question frames to use with students. One of the questions that we asked was around transfer. Now, we didn't word it exactly like that, but we just said, where are you taking your experiences from this course, and where do you see it either in your life or maybe in other areas of the school? And oh my goodness, we were blown away with some of the things that students were saying. So one student out of my psychology course was saying, well, when I go out into the rugby pitch, I'm using this concept and this one, and just started naming them and how they're using them to do something that they love. We had another student who was in first language, and they were talking about how they saw the relationships between this course and their English course, and just how that was related, but then also the connections about just that they have an identity group outside of this class because of the language that brought everybody together, and how that was created. So there are just some really neat ways that students were talking about transfer, and that to me was like the ultimate, like there was no assessment that would ever align to this, but the students could talk about how those concepts were transferring across their life, and like we weren't waiting for you to be an adult to say, how do you apply this in a job? It was right here, right now, and this is why we're doing it.
Yeah, and I find that also we do that with our primary students. What does good learning look like at our school? And then we did some work around that at the beginning of the year, so that teachers came to an agreement. Good learning looks like this. This is what we will see. This is what we will hear. This is what we will feel. And then, okay, so what questions can we ask on those looking for learning walks of students, so that we will know that this is happening? And so we've got 5 or 6 questions. I just go in there, I ask the 5 or 6 questions, I write it down. And isn't it wonderful when you hear them using that? One of the questions is, why are you learning this? Where can you use this learning? Or how else can you use what you're learning here? And when they tell you, oh, well, when I leave school and I want to be a doctor, or if I was a baker and I didn't know how to measure, then I might make things that are too sweet. And then you'll get a heart attack because too much sugar is bad for you. This is what they were saying. I was just like, oh, okay. But when you're 6 or 7, this is a very valid understanding.
Absolutely. Right? A nice connection between maths and health.
Exactly, and so I love that. You see that now, you can hear that transfer and that thinking that's going on with students. Yeah.
Well, thank you all for being the kind of school leaders who are getting into classrooms, who are engaging with students and with teachers in planning, in modelling lessons, in planning, getting in planning alongside the teachers and having that open door. You can come in and ask me questions and plan with me, because this is what schools need and the type of school leaders that will help to make a difference. So thank you for being here today.
Our pleasure.